In 1978, Aberdeen was shaken by the brutal murder of Dr. Brenda Page, a brilliant geneticist whose life was cut short in her own home. For nearly 45 years, her case remained unsolved, until justice finally caught up with her killer. Hello, welcome to Cold Case UK. Brenda Page was born in 1946 in Ipswich, Suffolk. Her father was Victor Edward Page, who worked as the first screensman in a flour mill. Her mother was Florence Adams. The family lived on Levington Road in Ipswich. Brenda had one older sister, Rita, who was born in 1934. From a very early age, it was clear that Brenda was an exceptionally gifted child. According to sources, she had taught herself to read before she started primary school. When her sister Rita was at college and had to carry out a child assessment as a project, she chose Brenda, then age 6, as her subject. Rita's tutor found it difficult to believe how advanced Brenda appeared to be for her age. Brenda went on to excel academically throughout her schooling. She graduated with a first-class honours degree in science from University College London. She then pursued a doctorate in genetics at the University of Glasgow. She was part of a generation of women who were breaking into scientific fields that had been dominated by men. It was during her time as a postgraduate student in Glasgow that Brenda met Christopher Merlin Harnett Harrisson, known as Kit. Harrisson had been born in Ripon, North Yorkshire. He had studied at Queen's College, Cambridge, and had worked as a tutor in biology at Harvard University in the United States. By the time he met Brenda, he was working as a researcher at the Institute of Virology in Glasgow. The couple began a relationship. On 6th May 1972, Brenda Page and Christopher Harrisson married at St. Mary Le Tower Church in Ipswich. It was described as a grand occasion. Brenda made her own intricate bridal gown. In October 1973, Brenda was appointed head of the cytogenetics laboratory at the University of Aberdeen. It was a prominent position. She was one of very few women in Britain to hold such a senior role in the scientific community at that time. The couple moved to Aberdeen and bought a home together at Mile End Place. Harrisson secured a research post at the university. According to sources, from the very beginning of their marriage, Harrisson subjected Brenda to domestic abuse. She was hospitalized on more than one occasion following assaults. In correspondence to her solicitor, she described a catalogue of violent assaults occurring every few months and repeated threats from Harrisson to kill her. In a letter written to her solicitor, Brenda wrote the following words: "If I depart this earth rather suddenly, do please make sure that I get a good post-mortem and that my sister and her boys get any benefit." A close friend of Brenda's later recalled that Brenda had asked her to tell police if anything ever happened to her in unusual circumstances that her husband was responsible. The couple separated. Brenda was told to leave the marital home. They lived apart for approximately 2 years before officially divorcing in 1977. In divorce proceedings, Brenda described Harrisson as aggressive, threatening, and violent. She was granted her divorce on the grounds of cruelty. Following the divorce, Brenda took legal steps to prevent Harrisson from approaching her. He was also banned from the university grounds. According to sources, between 1976 and 1978, Harrisson continued to threaten to kill Brenda and kept track of her movements. After the divorce, Brenda was left struggling financially. She purchased a ground floor flat at 13 Allan Street, Aberdeen. In order to cover her costs, she began working in her spare time as an escort through an agency called Capital Escorts, based in Edinburgh. Working under the name Miss Brenda Adams, she met businessmen at restaurants in Aberdeen for meals. According to sources, Brenda had told her mother, her sister, and a close friend about this work. Her sister Rita later stated publicly that the family had known about the escort work and had no concern about it. Brenda lived alone at her flat on Allan Street with her 3 cats. She continued to lead her laboratory at Aberdeen University. She continued to build her career. She had survived years of violence and abuse. She had rebuilt her life. She was 32 years old. On the evening of Thursday, 13th July 1978, Brenda left work at Aberdeen University. She went home to her flat on Allan Street to prepare for an evening out. That night, she dined at the Treetops Hotel on Springfield Road, Aberdeen, with 2 businessmen. A second woman had been expected to join them, but she did not arrive. Brenda stayed until around 2:30 in the morning. One of the men offered her a lift home. She declined and drove herself back to her flat on Allan Street alone. Brenda did not arrive at work the following morning, Friday 14th July 1978. Her colleagues became concerned. She was known as a conscientious and punctual employee who regularly arrived early. When a colleague was unable to contact her by telephone, he alerted her elderly neighbor, Elizabeth Gordon. Elizabeth Gordon discovered Brenda's body in the flat. Brenda Page was found in her nightdress on her bed. She had suffered at least 20 blunt force injuries to her head and face. She also had defensive injuries to her hands and wrists, indicating she had tried to protect herself. The post-mortem concluded she had been beaten to death. It was believed that her killer had entered the flat through her bedroom window, which had been forced open, and had waited for her to return home before launching the attack. Grampian police launched a murder investigation immediately. Approximately 35 detectives and 50 uniformed officers were assigned to the case in its first week. They conducted over 550 inquiries and gathered more than 200 statements. On the night of 14th July 1978, within hours of the discovery of Brenda's body, Harrisson was arrested and interviewed by police. He was known to police as a suspect due to his history of threatening and abusive behavior towards Brenda. However, it was decided there was insufficient evidence to prosecute. A report was submitted to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. The Crown Office concluded there was not enough evidence to take the case to trial. Harrisson was released. 6 days after the murder, Harrisson released a statement through his solicitor expressing grief at Brenda's death and stating that he hoped the killer would be found soon. Police searched extensively for a green duffel bag believed to contain the murder weapon, blood-stained clothing, shoes, and a watch. Divers searched the River Dee. 50 uniformed officers searched the verges of what is now the A90 Aberdeen to Stonehaven Road and the railway line heading south. Aberdeen residents were asked to check their bins for blood-stained clothing and a weapon. Police officers accompanied refuse workers on their rounds in Stonehaven. Some tabloid newspapers, upon learning that Brenda had worked as an escort, implied she had been involved in the more criminal side of the escort industry. This caused great distress to her family and colleagues. Those who knew Brenda rejected this characterization entirely. Despite the scale of the investigation, no arrest was made. The investigation was wound down in 1980. Christopher Harrisson moved to the Netherlands, where he lived for a number of years. The case remained open but unsolved. In 2015, 37 years after Brenda's murder, Police Scotland's major investigation team North was instructed by the Lord Advocate to carry out a full reinvestigation of the case. Witnesses were re-interviewed. Over 500 new statements were gathered. Numerous forensic organizations were engaged to analyze available evidence using the latest techniques. two significant pieces of forensic evidence emerged from the reinvestigation. First, a minute flake of paint had been found on the forced bedroom window of Brenda's flat at the time of the original investigation. This flake had been retained but never fully examined. Using modern forensic analysis, it was matched to the paint on Harrisson's Mini Traveller car. Second, semen had been found on a duvet at Brenda's flat. Harrisson had claimed he had never had sexual intercourse with Brenda at the Allan Street flat. Using advances in DNA analysis, the semen was found to be 590 times more likely to belong to Harrisson than to any other male. Harrisson had by this time returned to Aberdeen. In March 2020, he was arrested and charged with the murder of Brenda Page. He was also charged with assault and domestic abuse offences relating to his conduct towards Brenda during their marriage, and with attempting to defeat the ends of justice by disposing of a watch, a bag, and a pair of shoes after the murder. The trial began on 21st February 2023 at the High Court in Aberdeen. Harrisson was 80 years old at the time of the trial. He was represented by advocate Brian McConaughey. The prosecution was led by Advocate Deputy Alex Prentice KC. Harrisson denied all charges. He lodged a special defense of alibi to the murder charge, stating that at the time of the murder he had been at home. The prosecution presented evidence of Harrisson's prolonged campaign of domestic abuse and coercive control throughout the marriage and after the divorce. Evidence was also presented of his continued threats to kill Brenda and his surveillance of her movements in the period between the divorce and her death. The jury heard evidence of the forensic findings, including the paint flake matched to his car and the DNA from the semen found on the duvet. The trial lasted 10 days. On 9th March 2023, the jury returned a majority verdict of guilty. Christopher Harrisson was convicted of the murder of Dr. Brenda Page. He was also convicted of assaulting Brenda on various occasions between 1972 and 1976, and of committing a breach of the peace by threatening to kill her and monitoring her movements between 1976 and 1978. Lord Richardson sentenced Harrisson to life imprisonment with a punishment part of 20 years, meaning he would have to serve a minimum of 20 years before becoming eligible to apply to the parole board for Scotland. Harrisson was 82 years old at sentencing. In his sentencing remarks, Lord Richardson described the attack as premeditated and the assault as sustained and vicious. He stated that Harrisson had created a void in the lives of Brenda's mother, sister, nephews, and friends which could never be filled, and that her potential as a brilliant scientist had been left forever unrealized. Brenda's family released a statement after the conviction. They said that they were absolutely delighted with the verdict. They said that Brenda's murder nearly 45 years ago, at the incredibly young age of 32, had affected the family and so many of her friends, work colleagues, and Police Scotland. They said that not a day had gone by when they did not think about Brenda and the horrendous ordeal she must have suffered that night. They described her as an extremely kind, intelligent woman with her whole life ahead of her. In January 2024, the University of Aberdeen unveiled a plaque in Brenda's memory and planted a tree in her honour on the Forester Hill Hospital campus in Aberdeen. A former colleague said that Brenda had laid the foundation for genetics in healthcare, not only in the north of Scotland, but internationally. Another colleague noted that it was genetics that had ultimately brought her killer to justice. Brenda Marilyn Page was born in 1946 in Ipswich, Suffolk. She taught herself to read before she started school. She earned a first-class degree. She earned a doctorate. She became the head of a genetics laboratory at one of Scotland's leading universities at a time when very few women held such positions. She survived years of violence and abuse. She divorced her abuser. She started over. She built a new life on Allan Street, Aberdeen, alone with her 3 cats. She wrote a letter to her solicitor and told him what to do if she died suddenly. She was right to be afraid. Christopher Harrisson was convicted of her murder 45 years after he committed it. He is one of the oldest people ever to be convicted of murder in Scotland. Dr. Brenda Page was 32 years old when she was killed. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to see the full reach of the science she helped build. She never got that chance. But her name was never forgotten. Her case was never closed. And in the end, the very science she gave her life to was what brought her killer to justice. Hello everyone, thank you for listening. And drop any feedback below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I hope to see you again in the next case, right here on Cold Case UK.